An avalanche of blackbirds in a Mexican neighborhood, a little monkey astride a cat crossed the highways, a spectacular traffic jam that stretches as far as the eye can see in Malaysia, and many other amazing and rare sequences await you in this video. Get ready, here are several things you have to see to believe. In this sequence, we see an experienced man trying something very dangerous, and that you should never imitate. This man, dressed in blue, approaches a greenish pond with a firm step. He is holding a piece of raw meat in his hand, and his goal is to feed a crocodile that is slumbering in these muddy waters. Nothing suggests that this dangerous reptile is under the shallow, stagnant water, and yet it is lurking there, on the lookout for unsuspecting thirsty prey. This man knows what to expect. By the clues he knows to notice, he guesses that the reptile is 10 steps away from him, and to attract his attention, he makes a violent blow in the water using his piece of meat. He starts again and waits. Then the crocodile answers energetically to this call. Suddenly, we see its formidable jaw emerge. The reptile rushes at full speed towards the one who disturbs his rest. Anyone else would have run away in a hurry. But this man, used to the reptile's touch, does not seem to be fazed. He steps back and drops the piece of meat into the gaping mouth of the predator, which immediately stops its run. Our man takes his distance and watches with relief the crocodile triturates the shreds of flesh. He may be used to feeding this reptile, but he must certainly feel a terrible fear each time he approaches it. Crocodiles devouring their masters is not an uncommon occurrence. These pictures come from an Asian village, and you will certainly find them adorable. In this small community, birds are loved and cared for. This little boy, no more than 4 years old, enjoys patiently feeding them. This child has formed an affectionate bond with a family of blackbirds. When these birds can't find grubs, berries, or pieces of fruit to peck at fast enough, they are sure to eat well from this little boy. In these pictures, we see the gentleness and patience with which he feeds these hungry birds, which flap around in front of him. The sitting child has all the time in the world. He wants to satisfy everyone's appetite. He holds a bowl of cereal in his little hand and feeds each one with chopsticks. Is there anything more adorable? You have to admit that the birds are quite turbulent. As soon as their beaks are not filled, they become impatient and cry out for another bite. But the child is not bothered. He continues his generous action without distraction. On one of the main roads of the capital of Malaysia, the inhabitants witnessed one evening a traffic jam like one rarely sees. The traffic jam was of formidable proportions. Individuals living on the highest floors of nearby buildings could watch and film. This traffic jam had no extraordinary cause. It was due to the slowness of the toll system. For hours on end, no vehicle could move more than 5 meters. The ambulances themselves were trapped in this infernal traffic jam. But what is unusual is the accidental beauty of this spectacle, seen from a distance. Indeed, these thousands of cars are at standstill in the two opposite lanes. On one side, we see the red tail lights. On the other side, the yellow low beams. These red and gold stripes, spread as far as the eye can see, give the illusion of a large-scale celebration and party. But what is less pleasant, one can imagine, is the incredible tumult of the prolonged honking, which must give headaches to all the surrounding inhabitants. The freeway will only be decongested long hours later. What to remove to the tourists who were there any desire to make the trip again? Friendships between different species of animals are always a pleasure to see. When these animals are cute and endearing independently of each other, their friendship is all the more adorable. This sequence offers an example. It's about a newborn monkey. This little monkey, which is the size of a hand, is probably too tender to survive in an urban environment. But it can count on the protection of a wild cat, used to the dangers of the street, and knowing how to avoid them. The young primate could not have found a more skillful and helpful protector. In these images, we see the monkey clinging to the cat's back. Both are walking through the city. They cross several alleys. We don't know where they are going or how long their journey is. What appears is that the monkey is quite happy with his mount. Perhaps he is abusing the cat's good offices a little? It is allowed to believe it, because generally the cat is capricious and hates constraints. In Istanbul, Turkey, the employee of a small warehouse witnessed an unusual accident, which he could not prevent. He is in the center of the picture, dressed in red. His task is simple. He has to place the various objects thrown to him by a colleague on the upper floor in the basement. The two openings, in the floor and in the ceiling, facilitate the vertical passage of the objects and allow the employee to save time. At the other end of the street, a young man comes out of a store and walks straight ahead, his nose in his phone. He approaches, enters the narrow room. The employee notices him but doesn't really pay attention to him. But when the dazed young man falls into the hole, the worker panics and tries to find out if everything is okay. The young man is very lucky. In the footage from the basement, we see that his fall was short. He fell onto a stack of boxes almost as high as the room, and which, tilting under his weight, allowed him an easy descent. The employee, thinking back, must have wondered how he could have remained unmoved as he watched this young stranger head straight for the hole. Let's go to the United States, to Chicago, on the shores of Lake Michigan. These spectacular images were taken from the top of a tower last month. During several days, the temperature had increased, which caused the lake to thaw relatively quickly. This phenomenon, as you can imagine, does not happen instantly. But what would we see if we sped up the images of the thaw to fit in less than a minute? Thanks to a Chicago television station, we get a glimpse. The spectacle is so beautiful that it has fascinated millions of people. We first see, near the shore, the huge expanse of ice cut in two. The detached ice pack slowly withdraws and gives way to the water of a dark and plain blue. Then comes the rest. We see the contours of the pack ice remaining attached to the shoreline, fragmenting into successive layers. It looks like a stripping. The ice crumbles into millions of flakes that float, swirl, disperse, and finally vanish into the currents. You would never have imagined that the melting of a lake could be such a beautiful thing. In the city of Chihuahua, Mexico, a distressing and unusual sight occurred recently in the quiet alley of the neighborhood of Villas. The day was serene, and there were no passers-by. Suddenly, a huge black cloud fell violently on the ground. At first, it looks like an avalanche of tar, but it is actually several hundred blackbirds that have collapsed on the road. The sequence that shows the brutal collapse of all these birds is incredible. This fall killed a large number of birds in one fell swoop. The others, who avoided the impact or survived it, are trying as best they can to gain height. It is a chaos. These images are so impressive that journalists and scientists talk about it all over the country. The cause of this catastrophe is unknown, but the hypothesis is that these birds were frightened by the sight of a falcon. When blackbirds face this predator, they gather and swirl around to confuse it. But this defense worked poorly this time. The hawk did not abandon its plan. It dived into the flock of birds and created general panic. The blackbirds may have thought they were high enough to swoop, but the ground was close to them, and their sudden descent was fatal for most of them. These images are funny and touching at the same time. In a snowy farm, we see a lamb in the middle of several dogs. This lamb is naturally very sociable and has an open and trusting character. He cohabits with these dogs and wants to get along with them, but the dogs are not as friendly as the lamb would like. They don't really seem to want him, yet he works hard to be accepted. He runs after them, but the dogs run away from him. They prefer to stay between dogs, but the lamb redoubles his efforts. He tries to imitate their pace. He plays the laughing and teasing comrade. He flies toward them to keep the company. Nothing makes it. The dogs move away. They snub him and look at him sideways. But it's not too bad, and he shouldn't be discouraged. This pitiful and sympathetic lamb should continue his efforts to be sociable. He will eventually be one of them. Here's a little wonder of confectionery improvised by cotton candy seller. The scene takes place in a fairground in China. The seller in front of this machine wants to amaze the children and attract publicity to his talents. He starts to work. The stick is gradually filled with a cloud of yellow sugar. The minutes pass and the size, the color, and the shape of this delicacy evolve. Passers-by crowd around and children are in front row, while the vendor shapes the cotton candy, which becomes huge and multicolored. It's a big, appetizing cone-shaped flower. Seeing that it makes the children present want to eat it, he asks who among them wants to taste it. One boy stepped forward and received the precious treat, but everyone can taste it. It is so big that it will satisfy a dozen children. The vendor is happy to please them, but it's a shame he wasn't paid for this neat job that took him just under 10 minutes. On the bright side for him, he will become popular in his neighborhood. All the kids will want to try the sweet, colorful Corollas. Surely you want one too. A motorist driving along a freeway in Britain captured this disturbing footage. There were extremely strong winds that day. The storm was raging, and the driver wanted to get to his destination safely. The gusts were so strong that the danger was real. During a part of the journey, he saw a green truck in front of him that did not inspire any calm. This truck was being buffeted by the winds and was not going exactly straight. So far, nothing unusual, but the gusts were getting stronger and stronger and were disturbing the stability of the truck to the point of making it lean dangerously. Several times, it seems that it is about to tip completely to one side or another, but each time the balance is caught and the truck continues its course as if nothing had happened. One wonders how the trucker was able to withstand such stress. We don't know if the trucker managed to complete his journey, but he must have scared a lot of drivers. A surveillance camera on the door of a house recorded a very funny sequence. We can see a young woman, cheerful and joking, making signs to the camera. For a few moments, she is making funny and happy faces like a child. From all appearances, she is in front of a relative's house, and she wants to signal her presence in a comical way. And so ends our video, where you could see some surprising and unusual sequences that we hope have amused you. As usual, don't forget to leave your impressions and remarks in the comments. Which of these situations amused you the most?